Hello and welcome back to Sheltered Sages, the podcast where two formerly sheltered homeschoolers, now adults, talk about the complexities of life one Reddit story at a time. My name is Philip.
And I'm Andrew. And that was the suavest intro you've done.
I kind of, in my D&D character, when we're playing it, I do play a very suave character in that way. Or a character that wants to be suave. Yeah, so I kind of channeled a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit of Eric Aurelius popped up here.
Exactly, just a tiny bit. But it helps, when you're trying to get into a certain situation, you're like, okay, got to channel that energy.
I'm just glad you didn't pop in the accent. That's what's important.
Yes, I'm not character bleeding that much. For people who don't know character bleed, go back to our D&D episode.
Yeah, episode 4. Geek Dev.
We talk a little bit about that.
Yes, well, welcome back, everyone, to another episode. And this week, we're going to be talking about a little bit of something fun.
Yeah.
So, what is that topic that we're talking about today?
We're going to talk about vacations. Yay. Generally because around this time, everyone's traveling various places. I was even looking at hotel prices recently, and they are skyrocketing. I was like, why? Well, it's around this time. You got spring break, right?
Yep.
A lot of people are leaving out.
Whether it's for individual colleges or colleges all over the country, things like that take that nice little week-long break. But you know what is one of the most chaotic times of the year? Spring break. Especially if you work in any of the theme parks or service industry in Central Florida.
Absolutely.
Because let me tell you, those people... Whew,
people generally lose their minds.
People be people in.
We talk often about how, you're on vacation, you're enjoying yourself. Sometimes you forget that you are a human being, or some people forget that they're human beings, and you need to be nice to individuals and continue to think with logic instead of just going, I'm having fun. I'm just on vacation. I'm enjoying myself.
Well, the other thing that's really interesting is that, especially as people who live in one of the premier destinations for vacationing, is that just because you're vacationing somewhere doesn't mean that everyone around you is also on vacation. Some of us are just trying to go pick up some milk at Walmart. We're not going to stock our vacation home with all the things. We're not going to get our Disney merch. Some of us are just needing to pick up that gallon of milk.
Some people actually live in this area,
What?
It's not just tourists.
What?
It's hard for people to understand that.
I just assume they shipped the people in out of out from the north, and they come down and they work here.
Yeah,
no one lives here. They got to drive back up to, North Carolina. I was gonna be North Colorado, but that's not a state.
I mean, unless you're looking into the future, Colorado splits off into North and South Colorado.
Oh gosh. No.
If we're in the future and it happened where it's North and South Colorado, add a comment here saying you were
guys,
here.
You predicted this.
But back to what we're doing today. We're going to talk about some crazy situations that happen while you're vacationing and when you're traveling to different places, and also some people who may or may not have been less than kind or a little more crazy during it. But before we get into that, just to let everyone know, we usually read from a subreddit called Am I the A-hole? We don't like saying that word. It's not as fun. And so from now on, we're going to say the substitute for that word is going to be picklefoot instead.
Yes. I'm sure at this point in time, because we're around I think this is our 10th episode.
Absolutely.
We'll probably not do the whole introduction every time after this, just because people have been listening for a while.
Yeah.
But
you're here. You've been listening.
And you've been listening. And if you haven't, and this is your first episode, welcome. I'm so sorry.
You're probably wondering what this is. We explained it. We told you what this is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So without further ado, we're going to start the episode now.
I'm going to start out with a fun story for you.
Fun is a strong word, isn't it?
It is a strong word in this situation. You ready for it?
Let's go. Let's do it.
The story title is, Am I the Picklefoot for refusing to travel with my best friend again after she messed up our last trip?
Let's get started.
Yep.
Let's start off strong.
Okay. About 2 years ago, I traveled to Europe for a week with my best friend and could not believe how horrible she acted. We stopped at a fast food restaurant on the way to the airport, and she made a comment about how the worker should be in college and not working there. At the airport, we ran into someone we went to high school with, and she laughed at him for working there and having to watch us take a trip to Spain. When we got there, she was extremely controlling, talked down to me and others regularly, barely wanted to go anywhere or do anything while on the trip, and had a horrible attitude 80% of the time. While I still managed to have a great trip and found a new obsession with traveling, I didn't have fun with her. I had fun in spite of her.
When these town starts playing him. Sorry.
There you go. When we were at the airport in Spain to go back home, I noticed 15 minutes had passed since we were supposed to start boarding. I took my suitcase and left her at the gate to make sure we were in the right place. By this point, we had almost missed 2 flights because of changed gates.
Okay. Oh, let's say this is because of her. Sorry,
No, but it's just, complications at
yeah,
airports.
travel. It's complicated.
The airport worker told me the gate had changed and we only had about 10 minutes to get to the other side of the airport. I ran back to where she was waiting and waved at her to follow me. When she got in front of me, right as I was about to tell her the gate changed, she said, "So are you just going to stand there, or are you going to tell me why you just had to get me up from where I was sitting?" In the most condescending tone. At that moment, I was completely done with her. After how badly she acted on that whole trip, I could have easily boarded the flight and not worried about whether or not she did. But I still came back for her, even at the risk of missing the plane myself. At that point, I lost all my patience and tolerance and just walked away from her. We didn't speak the whole 15-hour ride back to the States. When we got back home, we didn't speak for months. She later apologized to me and said that she realized whenever she feels insecure or bad about herself, she treats others badly to feel better about herself. I've forgiven her and still consider her my best friend, but I recently found out that she told the rest of our friend group that I was the one who was stubborn and didn't want to do or try anything new. To me, this is her way of not taking full responsibility for her actions. I decided that I will never travel with her again. Recently, our friend group started planning a trip when COVID dies down. So this is when COVID was still big.
Yeah.
I've made it clear that I won't be going. And while I haven't said it outright, they all know it's because she's going too. They said I should move past it and give her a second chance, but I refuse because I know how bad she acted. I truly love her and we are still best friends, but I've decided not to let her taint another trip for me. Does that make me a picklefoot?
So I'm just confirming. She said that she's not going to go on the trip because the other friend is going, not that she doesn't want the other friend to go on the trip.
Yes. Now, to give you a little information about it, because they didn't give it up front, they have an edit here. It says, "I forgot to list more details. I am a male, and at the time of this trip, we were both 22. We were both 20, now 24. My other friends are aware of everything, but seem to think it was both of us who behaved poorly or added to the trip being a problem. So it's a male and a female. Both 22 at the time."
Okay. And my opinion doesn't really change the nature of any of that, but I appreciate the additional context. So, OP, not the picklefoot.
Okay.
And I think specifically not the picklefoot in the sense of they're not trying to tank the trip for the rest of their friends to be like, well, they can't go, the person that they don't like. They're being like, I don't like this person. I don't get along with this person in terms of travel and things like that. So I'm just going to not go on this trip. I think that's the correct way to him, that being like, hey, there's this person I don't really get along with. I don't really want to go on a trip with. We're friends outside of it, but in this environment, I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be around that. I think it's absolutely something you should do.
Yeah.
I think there's some interesting things happening here. There's some interesting dynamics, because the one thing that I was drawn to was the reality of like this person trying to hold on to this friendship. Because you want to be best friends with someone who admits that they put other people's down when they're uncomfortable in order to make themselves feel better, and like has admitted that they lied to other people about you. Like, it seems like a very high school level friendship for you to try and maintain at 22 to 24 years old. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting like dynamic that was there.
And that's where I think I'm coming down to it, is like this person. I think we all have people in our lives that we enjoy being around at other times than others. I love my family and I spend a lot of time with them, but sometimes when it comes to like going on trips, my family can get a lot.
Yeah.
And I think we can all get that way where it was like we get really intense about like all these things have to happen. And there's a lot of context that we add because it's like there's medical equipment that we threw into the mix. There's all these additional things that we have to make sure that we grab. And it can be very, very stressful. But as an adult, it's like I have chosen when I go on trips that I'm like, hey, we're just going to do what we can to prepare. We're going to pack. We're going to go. And if we need to get something while we're there, we'll get it while we're there. Or we'll do these things that we can. So I've tried to do my best to alleviate the stress and things like that. Now, I still travel with my family, and I feel like we've done a lot better now that we've gotten older. But there's an understanding that is traveling with someone who makes the journey unenjoyable is not worth the travel, especially if you're going for the purposes of relaxation, vacation, and things like that, and exploration. So, yeah, I just think at the end of the day, it's like I would question how much of this, like, is this person your best friend? Because it's like, I have a lot of best friends, or I've had a lot of best friends throughout the years, and it's like, none of those people would ever be people that I'm like, I can't stand being around you during this one environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. It's interesting.
It's a very interesting thing. To give you a little bit more towards there and this edit, they said a lot of people are wondering why I'm still friends with her.
Yeah.
While she's always kind of acted like a parental figure, I don't know what they mean by that, I can honestly say that trip was the only time I've ever seen her behave so poorly. And she really has been a great friend before and after it. So I thought it was interesting as well, but what you're kind of saying too, when you're traveling with someone, especially to a new place, there's a difference between going on vacation for fun, just like going to, let's say, a resort and enjoying the resort there and sitting at the pool or something like that, and going like traveling through a different country.
Yeah.
Generally, you're there to see the sights of this new area and get to know what this location has for you.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like I'm just going to sit around and
You're
enjoy
going to
the
play
hotel.
tourist versus going to go on vacation. I feel like there's two different kinds of that environment.
And with that environment, you really truly need someone who can work along with you. In this specific situation, it seems like while they sort of work together in it, she didn't want to go anywhere. According to the original poster, she didn't want to go anywhere and do anything. It's like we came all the way out. She had a very
different idea of what the vacation was going to be, I think.
Yeah. Exactly.
I think she was thinking she was going to be on a beach in Spain for the whole week.
Yes.
And it's like, no, we're going to travel and look at, I don't know what they did, but I'm sure they were like went and looked at places and went to restaurants and shops and tours and things like that. Like, like if I went on vacation, like I haven't gotten a lot of opportunity to travel overseas, but like there are a few places I want to go, like Japan being one of them, or like I'd love to go to Greece. I'd love to go to Paris, these places, but I don't want to go to those places and just like sit in a hotel there.
Yeah.
Like, and I'll be honest, I'm not one of those people that wants to like pack my day full of activities. No. I'm one of those people that like, I want to plan one, maybe two things each day that I do, go and do that one thing, and then like see where the day takes me. Maybe if I want to go and like go to a shop or something like that, I'll do that. But it's really one of those things that like, I don't like to pack my day fully in those regards.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think if you're on vacation, you should have time to enjoy your vacation. Like it still should be, you're not working while you're out there. There's a difference between, I think, traveling and vacationing, and that way you can travel while on vacation and you can vacation while traveling, but sometimes those are separate. I will say for myself, my wife and I sometimes have different ideas of what vacationing is somewhat. When we were on our honeymoon, we decided that we wanted to go to Hawaii, which is great. It's the first time I had ever been to Hawaii. She had been before. So when figuring out this, and this comes back to what you probably should do, when traveling somewhere, find out what your, I guess, idea is of what you're supposed to be doing.
Your agenda.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, setting your agenda ahead of time.
Yeah, we talk through, okay, what do you really want to do in this area? What are those things that you want to hit on your bucket list while we're there? That way, when we got to the location, whether it was a little bit more frustrating or stressful, we'd already have an idea of what we wanted to do, and we can change it, but we already have that plan worked out. For her, she wanted to really explore that hotel and see what it all had to offer. For me, I like to hike. So I really want to go on a hike somewhere.
Oof. And I've heard Hawaii hikes can be intense.
They were intense. And I love her so much because while at the end of that hike, there were choice words said, not against me, just in frustration of how tired she was and how tired I was. It was a pretty rough hike, I will say. Like,
that's valid.
Walking up a volcano is not easy.
No. As someone who has climbed trails in the Appalachians, no.
Yeah, it's not easy.
Not Appalachians.
So, like...
Appalachians?
Appalachians?
Yeah, the Appalachians.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say it properly.
I don't either.
But yes, while we're on there, we had discussed that we wanted to do this. We both agreed that we wanted to go on this hike. And even though it was tiresome and we were both a little bit irritable at the end of it, we both agreed that it was a good opportunity. If you're going on a vacation with someone or traveling with someone that does not have the same ideas with you, that does not follow that agenda or didn't want to have an agenda first, that's like setting yourself up for failure. And then beyond all of that, the part that he really had problems with was that she was being mean to everyone.
Yeah, that adds an additional layer on top of it, where it's like, okay, it wasn't even just we didn't jive, it was you were kind of bullying people. And then even just like the way she talked about the person in the fast food restaurant and the airport worker, it's like, this is not a person I would want to spend a lot of time with.
No.
And so it makes me wonder, because it's like they're still young in that, like, those early 20s. And like, I feel like I had a lot of friends in my early 20s that like were part of my like old friend group that like we still hung around with each other because we're like, well, we have to, we're friends, this is what we do. But the reality was sat in very quickly that like, especially as you get older, you don't have to always be around with the same people, and you will grow apart from certain friend groups as you grow and your like basically your agendas don't align anymore and your opinions and things like that shift. So I think especially with traveling with friends, it is definitely one of those things, but it also kind of reminds me of like gauging how, like, you hear people talk about like how their opinions of people based on how they treat service industry workers or hotel staff or things like that. I feel like that shows a level of character when it's like how you respond in a high stress environment speaks volumes of your character in those things. Because it's like when you're in that high stress, when you're in that like heightened sense, if your like initial response is to berate people, talk people down, yell at people, things like that, then at your core, you have a lot of issues that you need to deal with.
Yes.
So like talking about travel and things like that and things not going well and stuff, wife's not going to love me because I'm not going to put her on blast because it was a very stressful situation. But speaking of honeymoons, coming back from our honeymoon, we went to Barbados over there, and we went to the Sandals Resort, which for you, shout out to Sandals because they are phenomenal. But on our way back, we had a connecting flight from Miami to Orlando. And when we landed in Miami from our flight from Barbados, we did not have our luggage until literally like 15 minutes before our flight was supposed to depart.
Oh no.
Yes. So we got our luggage, and I kid you not, we were running through that airport trying to get, and I don't know if you've ever been to Miami airport. It is not a fun airport. It is big.
Yeah.
It is convoluted. It was in the middle of like holiday travel because we got married in December. So everyone was traveling for the holidays. So that added an extra layer. So when we got to our gate, flight had already left. We missed our flight. And through no fault of our own. And so at that moment in time, neither one of us had eaten anything. Neither one of us, and understandably, the wife was fuming and mad. And so we get there and we're going to the desk to try and figure out like, hey, what's the plan? How do we get home? Kind of thing like that. And I could just tell that she was getting worked up and she was getting frustrated. And again, understandably so. Like it was getting late. We were tired. We had been traveling all day. And so it's like, it's one of those moments where it's like, I stepped in and was like, hey, Tag, I'm going to take over from here because I'm okay. I can breathe. You go stand over there, call your dad, let him know what's going on. Maybe see if we can't get something, see if one of them would be willing to drive down and pick us up from Miami, which is like a 3-hour drive. It would have been really bad.
On how fast you drive.
Yeah. So 3-hour drive. So it would have been uncomfortable and unfortunate, but we could have made it work. We had options, but it's in that moment where you're just like, what do I do? What do I do? Like that your like emotions can grow and build and things like that. Yeah. But recognizing that like she wasn't happy and that she was getting frustrated, and I didn't want her to take that out on an employee. And she is not one of those people that does that. It's very much one of those things where it's like situations build up to a point where like, hey, unfortunately I'm directing this at the person directly in front of me, and we all know it's not the poor attendant's fault that's working over the desk. So I was like, you go stand over there, call your dad, I'll talk to the attendant, and we'll figure this out. We'll make it work. We got a connecting flight an hour and a half later. It was much later than we intended it to be, but we were able to get back and we were able to get home, and it all ended well. But it was just that reality of like, when stressful things happen, people don't react in the best of ways, but you have to be willing and comfortable with how those people are in those moments. And so this friend who you claim is your best friend clearly has a bad habit of putting people down. And I don't love the fact that they're kind of a parental figure when you're the same age, because you said they're both 22 and both 20. Like, that's an interesting dynamic for a friendship group. So especially if this person is the paternal friend, like the mom of the group, like I'm gonna imagine they're like the mom of the group, because we all have that one friend who like sets all the plans and things like that. I'm gonna imagine they're the mom of the group. But if that's how they act on travel, you have every right to be like, I don't want to do that. So I think they handled it the best way possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing when you have people who in stressful situations act out in a negative manner, because again, if you're traveling somewhere and you're going to go through stressful situations and you have a choice of who you get to bring, I don't want to bring someone who's going to start fighting people or yelling at people or being mean to individuals, because that makes me feel uncomfortable and embarrassed too.
And it also, like, not saying that this is what we should be worrying about, but it kind of reflects poorly on us as well. And so it's just one of those things where you're just like, if you have that choice, and again, I think he handled it, OP handled it the correct way of being like, I'm going to excuse myself from this trip. I'm not going to expect you leave. I'm going to leave.
Absolutely. You want to hear some comments on that?
Absolutely. Give me some comments.
Let's hear some comments. So it says, not the picklefoot. Sounds perfectly reasonable to me. If there's one thing I've learned in all my years, it's to be honest and open with people, even if they don't like it. If their behavior isn't acceptable, tell them. I've done a lot of traveling, and some of the people I've been with have been difficult. At the end of the day, it's your choice, and choosing not to go does not make you a picklefoot. And the original poster responded, thank you for the response. Everything you said is how I feel. Traveling is something that is very important to me now, and I want to make sure I do everything I can to have the best experiences while doing it. I love her, and I know people can change. But when it comes to this situation, I don't see enough improvement or self-acceptance when it comes to her behavior.
And I think as long as, along with the commenters thing, as long as what you're doing is correct in terms of the brutal honesty, because sometimes some people use that as a cover to say some really mean stuff. I'm like, oh, I'm just honest. And like, okay, well, don't be that person. But I do agree with that mentality.
Yeah. And I think if you are known for being kind but honest, people, even if they don't like what you're saying at a certain point, they will respect you because they know that you're not saying it in a malicious manner. I keep saying over and over, positive intent. Positive intent basically means that you always try to have the idea that whatever someone is doing towards you, if it is reasonable, that they mean it in a positive way.
Not taking someone's like things and automatically assuming the worst.
So I think that's the thing. But so
it's a good first story. I like that.
First one,
very interesting. Not the picklefoot. Friend is definitely, at least in that scenario, a picklefoot. And don't blame them at all for not wanting to travel with that person.
That's fair. So do you have a story for me, friend?
I do. Am I the picklefoot for canceling vacation less than 24 hours in due to my kids' behavior?
So they were already in the vacation.
They were already in the vacation.
The vacation is canceled. Depending on what the kid did, no.
We'll certainly see.
Yeah.
All right. My husband and I have 3 kids, 9 male, 8 male, and a 3-year-old female. The boys have been driving us crazy. They fight like cats and dogs. We've had countless talks with them about respecting each other, to no avail. I understand sibling rivalry, but it's gotten to the point it's disruptive to us all every day. I already told my husband last week I wasn't sure if the vacation was a good idea. My husband shut me down pretty much immediately, and things went ahead as planned. First of all, the 3.5-hour car ride was predictably awful. Boys fighting and riling each other up the whole time. Husband and I kept trying to reassure each other that things would be better once we got there, and they would be too excited to cause trouble. We were wrong. I don't know why you would think that would be there. That's how it would work, but I understand. We were wrong. They had so many reminders of what not to do once we got to the rental house, so they do everything wrong from the get-go. Shoes on the white furniture? Check. Running in the house? Check. I turned my back for 2 seconds and the 8-year-old threw a box of chalk in the pool to keep his brother from getting it. We went out to lunch and they were out of control in the restaurant. 9-year-old ran away from us in a strange place because he didn't get his way. We finally go to the beach, and they are frankly being brats, refusing sunscreen, fighting over toys, pushing their luck repeatedly, and going further and further out into the water when we told them not to, and cursing. By the time we got back to the house, it was around dinner time, and I was fed up. They were totally ruining it for everybody. Nothing had worked, and I told my husband we needed to go home for the reasons mentioned above, mainly that they needed to see some real consequences. My husband still insisted it would get better. I put my foot down and told him that I didn't even want to be here at that point, so either I was leaving or we all were. He got super ticked and told me it was ridiculous and unfair to our daughter. I actually agree with him, but saw no other choice at this point.
Their 3-year-old daughter?
Their 3-year-old daughter.
Sure.
I'm sure the 3-year-old will remember.
Yeah.
Of course, when I tell the kids, they immediately burst into tears and are begging to stay, promising they'll behave. My mother, who came with us, was also near tears. She thinks her precious grandbabies do no wrong. She argued with me too, begging me to just let it go, but I refused to budge. So we left, less than 24 hours into a 4-day vacation. Half the ride home was spent with them sobbing and my husband pretty much just giving me the silent treatment the whole way. My mother decided to stay behind a little longer, but then started randomly texting me about 30 minutes in, asking if I was serious. She knew I was, and told me the whole reason she came was to spend time with the kids. So I had now ruined it for everyone, and their only little ones.
Yep.
Here we are at the following evening, and pretty much no one likes me right now, except my 3-year-old. Are they right? Am I the picklefoot?
No.
Yeah.
No. I was laughing a little bit because this is not parental advice. If you are parents of children who are like this, I first want to say to you, I'm very sorry.
Best
it sounds
luck.
like a very complicated and difficult situation. Mm-hmm. Please know that my heart goes out to you because I understand that children can be complicated. I do not have children of my own.
I do not either.
I have not had to deal with it, but I get and I respect that. That said, oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Those kids doing so many terrible things over and over. And I have seen this before where, you have the parents who are like, please get off of that. Please don't do that.
Please
and they just,
please stop.
Please stop.
Please stop.
Please stop. And they just do what the parents say. It's almost at the point where you're like, why are you even saying it? They're not listening to you. And if they are listening to you, they're hearing it and just deciding.
Choosing to do the opposite.
Yeah, they're just doing it. And so then it's like, ooh, if my parents are listening, which they might be, they know that we would not have gotten away with
that was the thing. I was reading the story and I'm like, my parents would never.
Never.
No. But to be fair, I wouldn't be doing this behavior either.
No.
So
because before this situation, they have taught us that when they say certain things, especially when we're not at home, you take those things seriously. They have rescinded certain vacations and things like that for far less than anything that is listed here. So we know that something like that will happen.
Yeah.
We know.
Yeah.
And so seeing them doing this, seeing them going oh, the kids are kind of complicated and things like that. Now, I understand the other side. Grandma, I'm going to call her grandma in this situation.
That's fair.
Grandma wants to be around the kids and they're on vacation and she wants to see them. Well, if the kids are being bad, right? Mm-hmm. Grandma is not going to take care of the kids later on while being bad. Grandma didn't stop them from running over the furniture and throwing the chalk into the pool. Grandma didn't do anything to stop this from happening. So while I respect grandma for wanting to spend time with the kids, mom is the one who's having to deal with this situation.
Yep.
Same thing with the dad who's like, oh, it's going to get better. You know, we're going to resolve it. I mean, dad might have in the same way have to deal with it. It seems like dad is a similar boat, right? That said, it seems like a lot of this came down on the mom. And mom decided, I'd rather not deal with this and go home versus putting all the pressure of this family's vacation on my shoulders while my kids are doing all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And then pretending like it's okay because everyone else wants to enjoy their vacation. That's not a vacation for her.
No, and honestly, this is something we talked about a little bit, I think, with our parents episode about like that feeling of sometimes mom's doing a lot of work that gets unacknowledged, unappreciated, and that feeling of like, I'm not important. And I can imagine that this mom is feeling something similar. She's trying to make things right. She's trying to encourage the boys to do the right thing. And it is just not happening.
No.
And the thing that made me really upset when I was reading this, and again, I don't have kids.
Yeah.
I do work with kids on the daily basis. And one of the things that children need is a united front. So one of the things that we're very serious about when, like, at my Taekwondo school is that we're all familiar on the behaviors that we're going to allow, the behaviors that we're not going to allow, and that if something happens, we all stand together on what the correct consequences are. We stand behind each other. You don't go to one person to try and get out of a consequence that the other person tries to put you in. You don't mom and dad it, as we call it actually there.
Yeah.
Or if, like, I want something from one person, they told me, no, I'm going to go to the other person so I can get a yes. We don't do that. And so what I'm seeing here is a lack of a united front. I'm seeing the mom who is seeing the poor behavior of the boys and is seeing how they're handling things, how they're doing things. And when she brings it up to the dad, dismissal.
Yeah.
And the sad reality is I can only imagine that some of this behavior is what has happened after the 8 to 9 years of these boys continually not having that united front from both mom and dad about what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And we're not going to get into discipline. We're not going to get into consequences and things like that. Yeah. But children do need consequences to actions. Mm-hmm. The amount of times, and I hate it sometimes because I do feel guilty when I have to enforce consequences on children at my school. Mm-hmm. The reality of the situation is that we only learn through consequence. And so as we get into adults, there are natural consequences that we have. If I don't go to work, I don't get paid. If I don't get paid, I don't get to get the fun things, or I don't get to pay for rent or things like that. That's a consequence. But when you're a kid, it's much easier for parents to brush away consequences or make consequences not as important.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important. And it's interesting because, like, there's talks about, like, gentle parenting and things like that, which, again, we are not a parenting podcast. Yeah. We don't have the experience to go into that. But what I have seen from people who do gentle parenting correctly is this idea of natural consequences for your actions.
Yeah.
So any thoughts that you have regarding that?
Yeah. I just, along with that parenting as well, it seems like before they left, because in the story, she originally didn't want them to go because of the behavior of these kids. Mm-hmm. So she knew that this was a potential to happen when they're on vacation.
Yep.
I think it is reasonable for you to go, you know, if this is the way that you want to parent the kids, or this is just the way the kids are, to go, like, I don't feel comfortable to go on a vacation with these children because of the way that they are behaving. Let's do something different. Mm-hmm. And so maybe it's like, let's test out something at home. Let's go over, if grandma wants to go over and spend time with them, let's get a hotel that's really close to home first. Let's enjoy a smaller time with them there and then see how they're doing. Maybe next time when they're behaving better, we can have it go over. Because if you're traveling, like we talked about before, travel is stressful.
Yes.
Sitting in a car for hours, even if you are full-grown adults, is stressful.
Yes.
It can get a little bit heated in those situations.
Yes. That's why car snacks fixes everything.
Exactly.
Car snacks and karaoke.
I mean, even when I'm traveling with my family or friends or something, booking hotels or getting into hotels, all the stuff that comes with it is an already stressful situation.
Yep.
To add on top of that, children who are not listening and things like that, it makes it even worse.
Mm-hmm.
No one should really have to go through that, especially if they don't want to, if they haven't decided this. So I'm thinking for them, she shouldn't have been put in the situation to begin with. But beyond that, no, she's not the picklefoot for going over and saying, I don't want to be in this situation any longer, and it doesn't look like anyone has stepped in. I mean, as the husband, I think what he should have done in that situation is gone, I see my wife is getting a bit overwhelmed by these kids. Mm-hmm. A lot of stuff is going on. Is there a way that he could step in and help ease the situation first?
Yeah.
Is he paying attention to what her feelings are looking like? Is he paying attention to what the situation is? Then can he go over and say, hey, kids, can you guys go up into the room right quick? I want to talk to your mom. I want to see how she's feeling and kind of help out. Or I'll take care of the kids for the next 2 hours. I want you to go out to the pool or watch some TV. I think that's a more reasonable thing. But if everyone's seeing these kids act out in this way and they're like, eh.
But that's the thing too, is it's like the dad is dismissing it.
Yeah.
That's the part, like, and it comes down to like the father constantly, and I'm imagining just seeing the way he's dismissing the behavior, like, oh, it'll get better. I'm like, that's not how that works.
No.
And like, so it's actually going to get, let me pivot to the comments, because there's an interesting comment that gets brought up, and I do want to talk about it. Mm-hmm. So they said OP equals not the picklefoot for ending the vacation. But these behavioral problems are not just during vacation, clearly. You need to get these under control. Your kids don't seem to understand consequences and are making themselves vulnerable to harm, going further out into the water than we told them to, quoting the original poster.
Yeah.
Something else said, this is something I noticed too. This is an issue that needs to be dealt with at home before taking the kids on vacation for a week. Whatever the dynamics are in the house that are creating this chaos, that needs to be fixed. Boys at that age are difficult and can be rowdy, especially so close in age. But all the adults in their lives need to step up.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing. And that's one of the things like interesting that we had to deal with at work, was that we were having situations with children constantly trying to like run around, do whatever it is that they wanted to do and not listening to the adults. And it had to get to a point where we were literally like, okay, everyone's affected by these consequences until we start dealing with it. And it started with like 1 or 2 or 3 kids that were doing the right thing and everyone else doing the wrong things. We started implementing discipline. Then it turned into half the students doing the right thing, half the students doing the wrong thing. Maintaining that discipline turns into 3/4 of the students doing the right thing and then 1/4 of the students that were still doing it. And I feel like that's going to be kind of how it stays, but that's what it normally is there are a lot of kids that have the ability to self-regulate, to do the things that they need to do and follow the rules. They just can get wrapped up in things, but they need that stability. That's the best word. The structure. Yes, they need that stability and structure, because that is where kids thrive. And obviously there are children with like even for myself that have like disabilities or things like that need that extra step to help with keeping on focus and keeping on task. If that structure is present, kids adapt to it and kids learn.
Yeah.
It's not going to be perfect all the time. Obviously it's not, but kids learn what they're supposed to. And that's what being part of being a child is being taught that this is how it works in the real world. And this is how it works as an adult. Yeah. And so when it comes to vacations and things like that, I feel like I think the person hit the nail on the head when they're like, these things need to be fixed at home before we go on vacation, because vacation is like, we're in a different environment. There's all these other things that are going on. Like, especially if you're talking about like a beach, going further, like there are rip currents, there are creatures in the water, things like that. Like we live in Florida, we know all the things that can happen in the beach. Kids 8 and 9-year-olds should not be ignoring parental instructions in those moments. Yeah. It'd be like the same thing about the kid, like refusing to grab your hand. That's the part where it's like, this is where the father needs to step up and be like, no, you're right.
Yeah.
And also these conversations, I feel like, because I imagine these conversations are happening in sight of the children.
Yep.
And like, there's been a lot of studies, I don't have references or things like that, but what talks about when one parent constantly dismisses the other parent in front of the children, they learn that behavior and learn to do the same thing. So if they see that dad is constantly ignoring mom's suggestions and mom's needs, wants, and desires, they learn that they can also ignore mom's instructions, needs, wants, and desires.
And there'll be no repercussions for it.
Because clearly there haven't been up until this point.
Yeah.
So proud on OP for being able to put her foot down and be like, we're done. I'm not doing this anymore. And I love it because it was very much like, fine, if you want to keep doing this, you can stay. I'm leaving. Yeah. And like, I hate it because it's like, that's not the best thing to do as a mom, but also like, it's like, okay, fine. If you think it's going to get better, you can stay with the kids and leave. It speaks volumes that he was like, well, no, we have to go, because like, he's like, oh, I can't be left with these kids all by themselves. They're little terrors. So he acknowledged he needed to leave. Yeah. Because mom was the only one who's going to take care of the kiddos like that.
And that's not fair to her. No. So I would say, yes, she's not the picklefoot at all. No. I think all the other adults in this situation are the biggest candidates for being a picklefoot. Yeah. And the best case scenario, thinking positive intent, they don't understand fully what's going on. And it's only mom who's really getting this. But in the worst case scenario, yeah, they're all being picklefoots.
But at 8 and 9 years old, we should start having a grasp on that. They're one of their oldest is halfway to being 18. Yeah. We should figure out.
Also, last part of it.
Yes.
The 3-year-old will get over it. I just want to say that. I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah, it's
fine. If you want to go over and say, we need to save this vacation because the 3-year-old daughter,
not she's the 3-year-old.
And at the end of it, the 3-year-old seems fine.
3-year-old's fine with mommy. Oh my goodness.
That was a good story. I like that.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's a little frustrating, but
It is, but it's also like, I feel like that's something that I, as a kid, experienced a lot. But as I said, it's one of those things that, like, yes, our family vacations would get stressful, but 9 times out of 10, it wasn't a situation where we were actively disobeying mom and dad. I'm trying to think, and I can't think of ever a trip experience where our bad behavior got something taken away from us on the trip that I can think of. I might remember something like in another episode, and maybe we'll make a short about it one day. But like, I can't remember anything off the top of my head.
Okay. Yeah, I remember a couple of times when, it's like we're going to turn the car around. I don't think we ever actually turned the car around. Maybe my mom or dad will say, no, there was a situation where we did, but I'm pretty sure
I'm sure the parents will touch base with me and be like, no, you don't remember that this happened? I'm like, no. I mean, I did have it one time where we were driving and I was thinking I was so cool, and I sat in the middle seat and didn't have a seatbelt on, and mom had to slam on brakes, and I went do down to the front of the car.
Andrew.
Yeah. Wear your seatbelts, kids.
Wear your seatbelts.
Yes.
Whether you're kids or adults. Wear your seatbelts. It's the law.
It's the law. And it's also just smart. Yeah. All that we said, do you have one more story for me?
I do have a story for you.
Let's hear it.
This one's a little more controversial. So you ready for this one?
Always. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Am I the picklefoot for not wanting to travel for a year because we can't bring our cat?
I'm gonna need context because, oh gosh.
Okay, here's the context. This is a shorter one too. My 22 female and my boyfriend's 23 male cat is 2 years old, and I love her with all my heart. I say our cat, but she's really mine. She's lived with me her whole life. I have taken care of her. She loves me so much, and you can really tell. She cuddles every night with me to go to sleep. Yeah, it's adorable. I love her with my whole heart. My boyfriend recently came to me with the idea to travel to Australia for a year, 2 years from now. I loved the idea. I was completely on board and told him that I want to go. However, if I can't bring my cat, then I'm not doing it. Well, I just found out that I can't bring her because of the breed she is. Oh, yeah, Australia has very interesting laws with different breeds that go over into the country. Yeah, I didn't want to go anymore. It simply is just no longer an option for me. I told my boyfriend this. He asked me if he applies to jobs there and gets offered one, that I wouldn't move with him, and I told him no. He then proceeded to tell me that he would break up with me at that point. He thinks I'm prioritizing the cat over my life and living experiences. I have no issue with traveling and leaving my cat for like a month. I have done that once before. But a whole year without her would break my heart. She's basically my baby. I don't feel like I'm really that crazy with my pet. Do I just leave my pet behind and move to Australia for a year? Or do I stand my ground and maybe only travel for a month somewhere?
I know it might be controversial, but not the picklefoot.
Ooh,
Yeah,
okay.
I don't think she's the picklefoot. I think if OP said up front, "Hey, I'm not going to travel for a year." That's a long time.
That's a long time.
I'm not going to travel for a year if I can't take my cat. We just rescued a cat.
Yeah.
We rescued her. I've been like nursing her back. Like we made sure she was like taken care of, done all the stuff. Like she is practically our baby. We cuddle. I totally understand this. Like these are my babies and I care about them a lot. So I'm not going to say, because I understand when you have a pet that is very, very close to you, that like, hey, I don't want to separate from this pet for over a year. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. That's a very hard thing to do, especially if this cat is important to you. For information, did they say how long she and her boyfriend were together?
In this story, no,
Okay.
I don't think she does.
Okay. I mean, I think it comes back down to the reality that she made it very clear up front that, hey, I'm all for that if I can bring the cat for a year. And then it's like, oh, can't bring the cat. It's not the correct breed. Okay, well, I'm not going then, because that's what I said I wasn't going to do. And then he's like, and it's 2 years. It's not like a trip that they planned for next week and then all of a sudden they found out they can't do it. It's 2 years out that you can change plans or figure out or things like that. And then it's the reality that the boyfriend was pushing back the way that he did. He was like, well, what if I get a job and we have to move there? And he's like, she's like, I'm not going. And I think it really comes down to the reality of like setting expectations and recognizing what's important to you. And if your pet is so important to you, which I understand completely, I have I did not have a pet prior to my wife and I getting together. She had 2 cats. I had like a dog that I lived with at my parents' house, but it wasn't mine.
Yeah.
But I had never had a pet of my own. But now my wife and I live together and I've like spent time with the boys and I've bonded with them and I care about them. Leaving them for a whole year would be a lot. And it'd have to be a really, really, really good opportunity for me to even consider that. And so considering that context wasn't given to us, the fact that he was like, well, what if I keep applying and like I get something over there anyways? He has, I think, every intention to move to Australia is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And she doesn't want to live in Australia if she can't take her cat with her. So respectfully, it sounds like we found a line in the sand that we're not going to cross.
Yeah.
And that might be where the relationship ends. I don't love that he threatened to break up with her as a result of that. I think it could be a reality of like, hey, is this relationship not going to work because I want to move to Australia and I want to stay here, or and she wants to stay there, or vice versa.
Yeah.
And that unfortunately is something that happens as you get older. Like sometimes relationships do fall apart because people have to move in separate directions for work, or sometimes long distance works. That is the other option here that hasn't really been talked about, was like, no, she could stay, or maybe she still lives in the States or wherever it is that they live and goes and visits him a couple times throughout the year. Goes and stays for a couple of weeks, has a cat sitter with someone, and then leaves. Yeah, it's not ideal. It's not what you would want, but it's also better than I'm breaking up with you because you're not going with me because of your cat.
Yeah.
So that's where I stand on it. I think she's not the picklefoot. I think she made her expectations and a boundary very, very clear. And when that reality came up that she couldn't take the cat, she was like, okay, well, then I'm not going. I'm not going to go for a year without my cat.
Yeah. I think, the biggest, why I say this is a more controversial story is because some people would hear the fact that she is not going to experience another country because of her pet and would say, no, this is unreasonable. You should go out. You can leave your pet behind. They're just a pet. They're not your actual child or something like that. I like to remember that people have broken up for far less.
Oh my goodness!
Like
Right?
a prank gone wrong or something like that's going on. If you looked at La La Land, I know it's a fictional movie, but La La Land, they were going in different routes for their careers, and they found out that it wasn't going to work out there. So going over and saying, "Oh, it's not fair for you to break up your relationship because of a pet," well, I feel like that's a reasonable reason to say, "I don't want to go somewhere and do it." Like you said before, she did communicate. She told him that this was very, very important to her, and he didn't seem to respect it. Or even if he did respect it, he was like, well, that's my boundary. I'm cutting it off. I'm going to go to this location whether you want to or not. And honestly, I almost respect him for that. I don't like the way that he did it. It was wrong.
I think it could have been done better.
Yeah.
But I respect that he's like, well, this is an opportunity I'm not going to pass up.
Exactly. And so explaining that to her and saying, I don't feel the same way and I am ready to leave this pet will make a difference. When my wife and I started dating at the time, my girlfriend,
Yeah.
I think we had this similar situation to what your wife had, where she had cats and then I had a dog, but it was my family's dog that was at the situation. So I didn't have any cats there. So way early on, she had told me that she truly loved her cats and that they were a big part of her life. And I respected that. And I was very happy to be along with it. While spending some time over at her apartment, funny story there, a little situation. I am allergic to cats. I have cats now. I am sitting and living around cats, but I'm allergic to cats. So after being at her apartment for a good bit of time, I was having the results of having that. My nose was a little bit messed up and my head was a little bit stuffy. So I kind of told her, hey, whenever we're sitting on the couch or something like that, if you can make sure that the pillows and things you give me are not pillows and blankets that the cats have been sitting on, that would be great. Thank you so much. So I left. I went back to my apartment, which was a little bit further away. And I'm there, like, getting ready for bed and everything. And I get a phone call from her. And she right out from the beginning of this phone call is sobbing, just crying. And she's like, I love you. I think you're a great person. I think that you're amazing. And I hope that this would work out, but I don't think it is because you're allergic to cats. And since you're allergic to cats, I don't think this is going to be a good situation. I really thought through it while you were basically driving back home. And I realized that if I had to choose between you or getting rid of all my cats, I'm going to choose my cats at this point.
Yeah.
And then I had to calm her down and say, no. I don't want you to get rid of your cats. I am okay with it. I am okay having to deal with these things because I care about you. And I also, at that point, cared about her cats enough where I'm like, I'm okay getting used to it or taking medication or something. All I'm asking for is just like, make sure that they don't sleep on top of the pillows that you bring to me. And so having that conversation, I still am around the cats. One of my cats goes over and cuddles with me every single night. They are like, our children in a way.
Is that Mando?
Yes, that's Mando. And while some people would say they're not children, they are not that important, that is for each and every person to decide.
Yeah.
If you want to put that importance to a pet, that's for you to kind of go over. I know some people, even when they're talking about medical things for pets and situations where they need like very expensive procedures, they're like, it's not worthwhile. Honestly, if it is worthwhile to that person and it can get, toxic in some ways, that's their choice. If that's what they want to do with their money, they can do that.
Absolutely.
And so for the original poster, they have decided that their cat is super important to them and that they want to keep that as a priority in their life. And if that's their choice, I feel like their boyfriend should respect that. If he doesn't want to stick with that, if he wants to travel and go somewhere else and he feels like it's worth it for them to break up for that, and she's okay with them breaking up too, break up.
Yeah.
I think that's an easy explanation, but I don't think that she is the picklefoot at all for choosing her cat over this situation.
No, absolutely not. And again, I'm a little frustrated that he jumped to like we'll have to break up over it. And I'm like, that's not how you approach that situation, but I also can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
But yeah. So any comments on that one? I'm quite interested.
Comments. So The top comment here is not the picklefoot. It's reasonable to not want to leave your pet for a year. It's also reasonable to want to go on a trip for a year without the cat. What wouldn't be reasonable if you two forcing your decisions on each other.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like your boyfriend is creeping into that territory by effectively offering you an ultimatum.
Yeah.
Sounds like you two have pretty different priorities in terms of travel and lifestyle. That's okay. Dating is a time to figure out if you're compatible long term. Maybe you two aren't. It doesn't make either of you picklefoot.
That's very true. I do think like they really hit the nail on the head when they said it was creeping into that attempt to be controlling.
Yeah.
Again, because I don't like the assumption of like we're gonna have to break up if we do this. But I also appreciate that they were both having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting story. Very interesting. Where are we at time wise?
We are near at the end.
We're at the end.
Of the episode. Yeah.
Darn.
Right. You wanted another one?
Mine's too long to do another one.
Okay,
so
that's fair.
I think it's fair, but it's always the time flies too quickly.
It does.
That's the problem.
This one went so fast.
It really did.
Hopefully it went so fast for you guys who are listening and watching, because for us, like, I just looked at the time and I was like, wow, we've already made it to like the end of this episode so quick.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Well, if you did enjoy this episode and would like to hear more of these episodes, please, if you're watching on YouTube, hit that little subscribe button and hit the little bell to get notified anytime we post a new video. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or Google Podcast, or wherever it is that you podcast, make sure to give us a little follow and give us a rating. And if there's any comments that you have, or if you want to write in your own horror stories of any vacations that you had, send us an email at shelteredsages@gmail.com. We would love to hear your crazy things, and the more that we get write-ins, the more that we can maybe make our own episode of just listening to write-ins.
I'm going to call you out if you're listening right now. I know one of you or two of you have a story that is quite interesting. If you want to stay anonymous, we will not put any of that like specific information in there, but like, please write in your story. I want to hear what those situations are, whether it's about travel, about family, friends, relationships, whatever it is. I won't say stump us, but like give us a story that might be a little bit more
Give
nuanced.
us a thinker.
Yeah. We enjoy that. That's why we like this podcast as well.
Yes.
We like to talk through the complexities of life, and maybe having two homeschoolers look at your situation or someone else's situation that you've thought about will give you a different perspective. So please send in, if you're a normal and a regular on this podcast, send us some stories.
Absolutely. I like the call out. You've been officially challenged.
Send us
by
some.
Philip.
Yes. By the next episode, we should have some write-in. Well, actually, we'll see. We'll see if the next episode we have some write-ins.
But yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening, and you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye.